I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is I didn't manage to complete the build in part 5, so I'm afraid there is going to be a part 6. The good news is, by the end of this video, I don't think you're going to care. I've made great progress with part 5 and I'm really happy with how things are going. So let's get into it. So as you can see, I've stripped back the troop bays again whilst I build. It just makes it easier. I've also been cannibalizing parts from the troop bay to use in the part that I'm building now, the middle bit. You can see I've removed those grey slopes to incorporate the grey slope detailing at the back of the middle bit of the ship. This is just to save me the time of constantly trying to find parts in unpacked Cybertruck sets. Obviously, once I've finalised all the rest of the build, I'll then dissect more Cybertrucks to pillage more parts to put all those bits back so we've got a complete ship. Next on the to-do list was to redesign or finalise the middle bit, this central tower that runs from the top to the bottom. In part 4, I mentioned what I'd created there was simply a placeholder to be adjusted at a later date. Well, that's happening now. I wanted a grey rim or a lip to the front of this tower, so I had to completely redesign it to incorporate that in a way that looked right from the top and the bottom. So as you can see, I did it in 2 halves. You just push the bottom half in and then you can connect the top half in. And with the top half, I started with creating the actual roof of the cockpit that's going to flow back towards the rear end of the vehicle. And once these 2 bits are connected, I think you can see the benefit of having that grey edge on the front. I think it just merges into the rest of that greebling detailing that I did in part 4. I personally feel that this is the right way. Some images have it all purple, some have the grey lip. I wanted to go for the grey lip. And then just to finish off this grey lip, I created these parts here. They're simply just plates with wedge pieces on them, and they just attach to the front via those studs on side pieces, and it just allows that to taper in towards the center of that tower. But before I work on the interior detailing of that tower, I need to finalize the underside where the troop bays flow across that central bit into that middle tower. I decided to go with a different design as I did on the top, similar, but it does have a slightly different shape, the underside of the Spirit to the top. So I went with this. As you can see, you'll recognize the design style from the top. It's just a different shape. And once they're both placed on and you take a look at the profile from the front of the ship, I really like the way it's a bit more bulbous underneath than it is on the top. So that's the top, the bottom and the middle bit sorted out, and it's really starting to come together now. But when I stood back and looked at it, I noticed that these grey prongy bits that stick forward don't stick far enough forward now, because I've actually brought that central tower out further because I put that grey lip on it. So I ummed and ahed about this. I didn't want to have to rebuild this entire section. So what I did was I came up with this solution by just simply removing these tapered parts underneath, removing that 1x1 stud and putting these tapered plates in and then reattaching it. It just gave me that extra length coming off the front of these, and I actually think it looks better with them than it did without them. And as you can see, once you've got all 4 of them in place, I don't think there's going to be any argument that it looks better. So sometimes there's a happy accident, as it were. It forced me into re-looking at this part of the build, and I just think it ended up better. So a win all round. Okay, so this is what I came up with for the center detailing of the tower. Now, it's made primarily from the clear parts that come in the Cybertruck. They have some nice detailing on them, and then I fringed it with some black slopes and various shaped tiles. And as you can see, it just slots in nicely. I've got some studs on side pieces within the tower, so it just clips in on the top and bottom relatively easily. And then once it is in, it marries up with the slopes on the grey lip perfectly. So it kind of just draws you in, and it gives you that sort of power conduit look down the center. I also added some bar detailing just because I couldn't help myself, and I thought it added some detail. And once again, I'm sure you'll agree, it really does finish off the front of that middle bit of the ship. But there's more. Because it's clear, I thought this is an opportunity to use some lighting. So I used some of these lighting bricks that I've had for ages. I bought them years ago on eBay. I can't find them again since. I've never seen them again since. But as you can see, got them in all different colours. I'm using the blue ones here. And when you put it back in with the blue lights on, it doesn't look anywhere near as good on camera because of all the lights that I've got on it. But in person, it looks super cool. It just creates this like energy bar down the center of this tower, which I'm super happy with. I just wish more of you could see it in person rather than on camera, because the camera just doesn't do it justice. So now the ship looks cool from the front, but look at it from the back. It needs a lot of work and it is daunting. I wasn't really 100% sure. This was quite challenging. It's also why the build's going on longer than I thought it might. And I can't just attach a back to those black bricks coming out. I need to integrate it in, which means a certain amount of rebuilding to keep it strong. I'm not going to show you all of that, but if you see bits change throughout this video that I don't talk about, it's simply I've modified things as I've gone along, as I've designed it. But you have to design it and then integrate it into the build. So I'll just show you more of the key features so this video doesn't go on for 2 hours. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to figure out was where the pilot was going to sit. So I started by working on a display, nice and simple. I will modify this slightly later, but I just wanted the placement to be there. So I fitted this little setup here so I knew where I wanted to put the seat. And in regards to the seat, rather than just stick some studs to some bricks, I decided to over-engineer this little contraption. I wanted it to slide for no reason, because I don't play with these things. I just like incorporating play features, as it were. So as you can see, I gave it a set of runners that can slide in between those two bricks, and I used one of those rubber band pieces that we're seeing more and more often these days to act as like a bungee cord. So once it was attached to a piece I incorporated into the back of the main build, you can pull the seat back to potentially put your figure in it, and then when you let it go, it just springs forward and glides in underneath that cockpit display. Wow, that's how it's supposed to work. It needs a bit of fine-tuning. With the pilot's position finalised, I wanted to work on the roof of the cockpit canopy, basically, and I wanted to be able to remove it in one piece so you can put a pilot in and out without trying to squeeze your hands through a little gap. So to do this, I needed to know how long I wanted this vehicle to be. So I didn't measure anything, I just eyeballed it and came up with this. All of those tiles are there so the canopy can sit down on it, and then you can just release it. It will only be connected in by those 4 studs, 2 at the back, 2 at the front. And for the roof section of the cockpit, I came up with this. This was the first bit I built. I was just trying to get the angles right, or the slope. It kind of ski jumps down towards the tail end of the ship. So I just used a combination of wedge sloped bricks and curved sloped bricks to try and get the look I was going for. Again, I didn't measure anything. I just went with what I thought looked right. And to install it, you simply just clip it in on those 4 studs, 2 at the back, 2 at the front, and you get an idea of your dimensions. Now this is where you stand back and look at it and say, does this look long enough? Is it too long? And so on. And if it is, you adjust it. But at this point, I was happy with it, so I moved on to the next part. The next part being filling in these holes in the side of the cockpit. There's 2 reasons they're here. The first one, if I'd carried on brick building down, it would have interfered with the pilot's shoulders. It would have been too tight. And secondly, I wanted to start detailing the side of the cockpit roof section. I want it to start flaring out as it comes in towards the back wall of the main body of the ship. And I decided the easiest way to do this was to just plate build, similarly to what I did with the cladding on the troop bays. I just added it after. So I used that technique again here. As you can see, I created these large wedge shaped pieces. This was to give me the shape, because it's a change in color into gray. And if I flip it over, you can see I've added all the detail I wanted. I added lots of venting. And again, this is 100% creative license here, or liberty. I just wanted to have fun with it and add the detailing in that I wanted to see. If I was designing this ship, not Bungie or 343, I wanted to make this ship for me. So this is what I came up with, and they simply clip onto the side, either side, and then when you reconnect the cockpit, it looks so much more complete. So with the top side done, it's time to take a look at the underside. Here we go again. So the first thing I did here was I built up the back of the main body, the troop bays and that central fuselage bit. I had to extend the back with the grey stripe using those slope pieces, and also the bit we did at the beginning of the video, I only did 2 studs deep with those purple 2x3 slopes, I've increased that to go 3 studs back to finish at the same place as those grey slopes. That finishes off that section of the ship. I can then work on the bit that comes behind it. Now, I think this might be the engine bit, and if it's not, it is on my ship. And I came up with this. This was my first draft. I'm literally just creating shapes here. I knew I wanted this bulbous section to continue back, and I wanted it in grey. So I made this and just offered it up to see how it looked. Once I was happy with how it looked, I then went about detailing it and figuring out how I was going to attach it to the ship. Okay, back to detailing, my favourite part. As you can see, I've shaped the outlets of the engine ports using sloped bricks and wedges, and I've also put a load of clear bricks in there. One, to avoid the empty hole look, and also because you know what clear bricks mean. We'll come back to that. After I'd done that and tried it on to make sure it fitted to the bottom of the cockpit area fine, I then added these black sections in. They basically flare in to the engine port, so when they're on the build, they're kind of tapering out towards that back wall like I did with the canopy above. Unfortunately, because they're black parts, I don't think you can see them very well on camera, but when you're close up, it looks really cool, and I'm really pleased with that effect. But what's even cooler than that is more lights. So for this part, I'm using a combination of red and orange light bricks, and when you put the two together, they give that kind of fire glow look. And if you just attach them to the insides of this section and then look at them from the back, once again, they look terrible on camera, but when you have it in hand in front of you, they give a really cool sort of fire glow effect. But one way or another, it doesn't affect the look of the build, so it's there if you want it, and if you don't, it doesn't matter. With that done, I added some black tile pieces to the bottom of it just for some detailing, and I also created the grey slope work to bring this engine pod up into the underside of the cockpit. You can see I just used a combination of grey inverted slope pieces, and I also used some angled bricks to come out behind each one of those black slope sections for the engine pods, just to add more detail basically. This also strengthened everything up on this part of the build. It's locked everything together. Also added some tiling to the top because I want this whole engine pod assembly to be able to come away the same as the canopy on the top, so I can just pull it away, so I can turn the lights on or off really easily and then just pop it back on again. So adding tiles and then just a few studs in certain locations makes it nice and easy to be able to pull it off, but it doesn't fall off when you don't want it to fall off. I also wanted to add some more greebling to the top sloped area. These sloped bricks with holes in the studs are perfect for adding greebling to, so I just added a combination of pipe work basically just to make it look really industrial again and mechanical. And I know these things are futuristic spaceships, but they're still going to have conduits and cables and fluids and so on that have to find their way around the ship. So I just feel it adds that sense of realism, especially around the engine pods. And then finally, I just added these two little bracing bars down the bottom for, again, no reason other than I just fancied doing it. Oh yeah, and I added these as well because they look cool. So now that's done, do the same on the other side, and then we can try it onto the body of the ship, the best bit. So as you can see, it just effortlessly just slides into place, clips in with those minimal studs that I've left, and you can remove it nice and easy. You can see how it's starting to integrate into that back wall that I haven't built yet, the back wall of the main body of the ship. I need to build. That's probably going to be the last thing I do. This will all flow into that wall nice and seamlessly, so you won't be able to see what's connected to what. So now that's on and looking really nice, I just need to sort out this bit here to marry up to the engine pod part. And basically I stripped this back a little bit, and then I just added a load of grey wedged tiles, some other detailing bits to basically make it look like it flows into that engine pod area. I also left a hole underneath, which is hopefully going to be how I'm going to incorporate the stand later on. But if we take a step back, that now looks like it is all one piece, and you wouldn't know that it comes apart as easily as it does. Right, let's move on. Moving on to the rear section of the cockpit, I've modified it slightly just for structural purposes and to allow me to add more greebling. And I started with these parts, which come in the old short sword set. And although there's not a hole in the end of this part, there is an indent that allows you to locate it into that trans blue peg. And then you can just slot it into those studs on side bricks that have holes in the studs. I've also used this technique a couple of times in this build where you just stagger jumper plates on top of each other to give you that sort of stepped look, and then I just put an off-shaped tile on top of it. At the back end I wanted to put some more of these sloped pieces. These slopes with the angle cut on into the end of them are fantastic. I think they give such a good effect, and the Cybertrucks have got loads of these in them, so I'm able to use them as much as I like. And then I created this little assembly here, which I view as some kind of mini exhaust for something, I don't know. And then just to add a bit more detail to those short sword pieces, I used some of these black fan pieces with the painted stud that comes in the Ghost of Requiem set. I bought loads of those Ghost of Requiems because there's so many great printed pieces in there, and I'm really glad to be able to use it on this build because I think it's a nice little detail on the back of this cockpit. And then I just added this assembly here to house my favorite part, these trumpet things. These are from the Bone Shaker Hot Wheels set. They're the V8 engine exhaust, so had to use them here. You see these on the CE Spirit, I believe, not on the Reach one. But like I said, this is a hybrid, and I really wanted them to feature on this build, and I'm glad I did because I think they look great. And this is what it looks like with both sides complete. And that's just about it for part 5. And unless you want me to show you it with the cockpit roof back on before you go. Okay, why not? You deserve it. You've sat through 16 minutes of video, so you deserve to see it with the cockpit roof back on. And here it is. So, what do you think? I'm really pleased with how the back end of this ship is turning out. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't looking forward to it. I just didn't have it in my head exactly how this was all going to work out. But through just putting things together and trying different things, it's managed to turn out all right in my book. Might not be accurate, might not be game accurate. I don't care. I think it looks super cool. I'm really pleased with it. As you can see, it's really strong as well. I'm able to pick it up. It's amazed me how strong it is, especially as you can just pop the canopy off in the engine bay. You can hold it in most places, and it's pretty strong. So that's good going forward. Part 5 will be I'll create the gun off the tail end of the cockpit. I'll also finish the walls on the back of the middle section of the main fuselage. And then I'll finalise those nose cones that I started back in part 1 that I still haven't done yet. So I'll do all of that. I would also like to either start making the stand or finalise the stand in part 5, but we'll see how time goes. This video was a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but what can I say? I had a lot to say. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did. And as always, we'll see you next time.